Now, of course, it is blaring that the red team is at war with these two alliances, and these alliances are definitely going to put their foot down because the red team has done some interesting things. Most notably being the genocide inside of their borders, but also the appearing of civilism, which, if you didn't know, was institutionalized by RJ and Cathwar, and these guys really don't like that. Now, the Triangle Alliance is doing this for common interest, but as a whole, the Triangle Alliance and the Trapezoid Alliance are doing this, and they're going to call themselves the Coalition of the New Order. So for now, the Coalition of the New Order, which comprises of the Triangle and Trapezoid Alliances, will be fighting under one banner, using their own abilities to fight against a greater power. So of course, most of the fighting is going to be happening over here in the west, south, and east of the red team, so now we can get started on that. The red team has been drawing up plans to invade Purple Persia for a very long time now, but they're having a little bit of trouble executing it. Of course, the red team is the strongest country in the world, but right now they're facing mercenaries that are not exactly employed by the government of the Trapezoid Alliance, but they are encouraged by the government of the Trapezoid Alliance. As you can see, the red team has only captured one major city, and if you remember, in this major city, there was a Triangle Alliance diplomat which was killed by a red team troop. And this red team troop that killed the diplomat in this major city dragged in the Triangle Alliance against the red team, since you know it's like attack one, attack all. And this could be referred to as the shot heard around the world, and that is because the events that followed that are going to be detrimental. But the red team is going to continue to make advances in the east of Purple Persia, now taking a lot of territory. Of course, this territory was not too defended, as their armies were fleeing back to the major cities and the capital. There is a lot of troops over here because this is where the red team, they know they're going to be primarily focusing, because if they can do that, then they can do that, which will get rid of the purple team from the war. So the red team is trying to do that as quick as possible. But the red team is going to have a surprisingly bad time over here in southern India. The blue team is going to kick out their military advancements, and for the first time in thousands of years, the blue team troops are going to march into red team territory. Now, it has been a very long time, like I said, it's been thousands of years, and the blue team, of course, and the red team are not the same country as they once were. If you remember, at the beginning of the series, the blue team was an aristocracy, and the red team, it was an oligarchy. And I guess the blue team and the red team have kept those attributes in the sort of sense that the red team is a dictatorial oligarchy, but, you know, the blue team, it's kind of like a monarchy, but it's a little bit more fair with the constitution. So their ideologies have stuck with them, but they are definitely not the same as they once were, going through governmental changes and different authoritative leaderships. But the blue team is going to have a surprisingly good time invading over here in the west, but also capturing two major cities over here in the east. And interestingly enough, if we look at the religion layer, this is impeding to the official territory / influence of civilism. Now, Arjan Cathwar is a very interesting character inside of this series. He rose up from the ranks and he claims to be able to conscript and read the Forgotten Codex. If you don't know what the Forgotten Codex is, basically it was a text that was adapted by the House of Mercialand, which was an ancient house. They're the ones that settled over here in Cathwar, and they made the Forgotten Codex, which outlines the way to end war. And Arjan is using that to his advantage, as now he is telling the people that if they win this big war, then the red team will be everything, and they won't have to fight war anymore. So this is giving a lot of nationality to the red team people. Of course, they already had a lot of nationality, but it's going to go through the roof. And it's to the point where the red team doesn't really need to use conscription. Everybody is signing up to be in their reserves. And these reserves are going to march into these areas, specifically the ones where civilism was. And this is very interesting because it shows people's loyalty to the belief. So the blue team is going to be kicked out of their incursions in the east, and the red team front line over here that was once in the east is going to be reimbursed. And this is going to be followed by a multitude of blue team failures on the front line, causing the capture of one of their major cities. Now, if you do remember, the red team was committing genocide against the blue team religion, and they're not going to refrain any longer. Arjan Cathwar has shifted his intent from trying to beat them to trying to bring down their aspiration. So the red team is just going to pounce into Bengal. This is a big key / lock of hope for the Triangle Alliance, is the frontier. And the red team is absolutely annihilating them, and through this they're continuing their ethnic cleansing. But that will be demonstrated a little bit later in the video, you'll see why. But the red team is going to be able to pummel the northern areas of Bengal, and they're actually doing a relatively good job. And now it's to the point where they're even able to invade into the northern Bengal state, which was once their ally. So it's a little bit awkward, like just, hey, we don't like you anymore, we're invading you. But the war is looking pretty interesting so far, but we are going to see the establishment of a communal kind of alliance. Now, this alliance is going to be established by the red team. It's not going to be permanent if the red team, you know, just so happens to win this war. Just what I'm saying is that this alliance is not going to last if the red team wins this war, and it is going to be the 3-Point Star Alliance. And a couple of countries are going to immediately join this. One, obviously, being the Indus country. Longtime ally of the red team, makes a lot of sense. But we also see Kyrgyzstan is going to be officiated into this alliance. If you remember, the Kyrgyzs did fight on the side of the red team in World War I, so it is not too out of their nature to do this. So now with the 3-Point Star Alliance, it's a little bit of a temporary thing. It's not permanent, but it is going to be a common interest alliance shared by the red team and their allies. And I guess now a sort of tripolar system has emerged again, but a tripolar system kind of alludes to a Cold War aspect, while this is just innate military conflict. But going away from that, we are going to see the red team is able to continue their invasions and endeavors into Persia. They continue expanding the front line, and they're going to capture a lot of the rural areas, which is where a majority of the purple team's population is. But they're also going to relaunch an invasion into Afghanistan. And the red team is not familiar with this land. They are very familiar with this land. They invaded a whole bunch of it. And they're going to immediately be able to capture the Afghan capital. If you look at the stability map, it gives you a pretty good sense on the war. You can see a lot of the Triangle Alliance members are dark green. Only one of the Trapezoid Alliance members are dark green, but all of them are relatively lime. But then it goes into like the yellow and orange, which is like South Caspia and like Persia, these areas. So it's pretty interesting to see how this might change throughout the war. But the red team is going to continue their invasion here into Afghanistan, taking a lot of their territory in the inland. And Kyrgyzstan is going to re-invade into Afghanistan. Once again, the Kyrgyz are not, foreign to this territory. They have invaded it before. But the Turkmenistan country is going to be a key player, as they are on the direct front line of the Kyrgyz country, and in which case they are going to start to invade. Obviously, they do have a lot of mercenaries employed by the Saudi government. And if you know one thing about mercenaries is that they don't have to follow government order. So that's going to be very interesting to see what Turkmenistan does. But now we're going to be going back over here to the south. The blue team is continuing to expand their front line, now getting to the dangerously populated and important areas of the red team. They are going to capture this major city. And if you see these 3 major cities, they were kind of a shield for the red team. Their capital's all the way up here. And now they only have 2 more lines of defense, one over here and one over here. And the blue team has just annihilated 1 of 3 of your defenses, and the blue team is actually surprisingly strong. Now, in comparison to the red team, they're not too strong. They are the 10th strongest country in the world, but the red team is, fixated on other areas. For example, over here in North Bengal, they are actually, putting a lot of their military into this, is because the North Bengal people are very subservient to the red team, in which case a lot of them might just join the red team. I'm not sure how that color is working, so maybe, yeah, that works better. But on the lighter side for the red team, they're going to be able to capture the Bengal capital, and in which case the entire thing is going to capitulate over to the red team. And now we're going to see the North Bengal capital is going to be captured. The red team is just going absolutely Napoleonic imperialist. And for the first time, I think, ever, the Burmese are going to be invaded by an outside power. Now, this has never really happened to the Burmese. They've, remained relatively dormant in their history, but they are now being invaded by the red team for interest and political influence, and the red team is doing an immaculate job. They are beating back their neighbors, and they're working together with their previous allies. Of course, the Indus country isn't really doing much, but over here in Afghanistan, the Kyrgyz are going to make increased gains, and this area is now completely occupied by trapezoid team forces. Now, I am representing that the, Afghan country still exists, but if I really wanted to, I could color this entire thing the color of South Caspia, because that's realistically what it would be. But going down south to Persia, the red team is going to continue to annihilate them, but actually in the south is where they're going to falter. They're going to be able to kick back red team forces, recapturing a major city, and they're going to be able to impede into red team territory, piercing through their border. Now this is very bad for the red team, as the purple team has just gotten some reinforcements from the orange team and the Western Arabians, and this is where the coalition of the New Order comes into play. The coalition of the New Order has been a thing that has been, proposed many times, and has been through many stages. The Western Arabians knew the red team would never stop. After World War I, the files uncovered by Egypt were very interesting. They were uncovered during the War of the Three Thrones peace treaty. Everybody was over here in England, while the Egyptians had discovered some files in Western Arabia, and this alluded to the stealing of the Forgotten Codex. Now, this information is only known by the Trapezoid Alliance members, that the Western Arabians were trying to steal the Forgotten Codex. This is because they knew Arjan Kathwar was never going to actually inscript it. It's because Arjan Kathwar is a fraud. Arjan Kathwar never had the ability to read the Forgotten Codex. He only did it to become dictator in the oligarchy of the red team, and the people are slowly starting to connect the dots. The Western Arabians wanted to take it, and the red team is abusing it, so why should we stay a part of the red team? This is a major plot point, and one of the reasons why Western Arabia was so harsh to Egypt, because Egypt knew a little bit too much. So Egypt is going to pledge their allegiance to the red team. Now, this is because they are anti-Western Arabian. They're not going to actually get involved in military conflict because they would just get stomped. Like, if they got involved, then Western Arabia would now look like this, which is not what you want. But with the files being uncovered that Arjan is a fraud and the Western Arabians are being genuine, a lot of countries are going to join against the war. Now, by against the war, I meant against the red team, because the red team is the one that initiated the war. One of the countries joining has been one that has been, a long time coming, this southern blue Arabian country. These guys are light red religion nationalists, and of course the red team committed their genocide against the light red religion, so it is pretty natural for them to join. But we're actually going to see a country joining the Triangle Alliance, and that is going to be down here in Vietnam. Now, it's not too special, Vietnam is just kind of chill for the past couple hundred years. And the red team is now facing an all-out coalition, like I said, the coalition of the New Order. The world has been under the red team for way too long, and it's time for somebody else to take charge. Now, whether that be a power in Arabia or Eastern Asia, they know that they can work together in the coalition of the New Order to take down the red team from their perch. And with this newfound nationalism boiling inside of their gut, they are going to re-invade into Afghanistan. But Afghanistan is going to be able to make a comeback as the Kyrgyz are being pushed out. This is mainly by Western Arabian forces. Like I said, they were coming up here as mercenary forces, so they're still wreaking havoc over here. But the Kyrgyz have just been completely kicked out of the Afghan territory. And you might be wondering, why is the red team letting this happen? Kyrgyzstan is not really anything without the red team, and the reason why they got pushed back is because the red team stopped their military funding. Now, why would they stop military funding, outside of their borders? It's because of something from within. The red team has fallen into civil war with a multitude of factions showing their faces, some of which being familiar and some of which only having been presented in the last couple of episodes, maybe even just this episode. But one very familiar face is down here in the yellow team. If you remember, the yellow team is a very old nation. They collapsed when the red team invaded them, and they have just came back. Also, a couple of episodes back, we saw the Bengal nationalists appear their faces, and they were, ethnically cleansed, but now they're back. If you remember, a very long time ago, the Indus country was a thing, and they have now just returned. The sort of ethnicity is the exact same, even though they are under the same religion. They are not the same branch. But this one over here is sort of like an Afghan sort of Persian rebellion. But this is going to allow for the complete eradication of red team gains over here, and the red team is now in civil war. Countries are going to bid their due as Kyrgyzstan and the Indus country are leaving. And of course, now the 3-point star alliance has been eliminated to just the red team, in which case the red team is going to, dissolve it. Very short-lived alliance, but it is going to be very important. Immediately, Lime Team mercenaries are going to, radicalize themselves to push them out of their country, and eventually they're just going to start to move back into Bengal. Eventually, they recapture the capital and set up the old government that they had a very long time ago, and the entire country is reestablished, and they are in full support of this rebellion, the Seafoam Green one, and the northern Bengals, with help from Burma, is going to be able to completely just go in and eradicate red team stuff in the north. And at this point, their capital is recaptured, but the red team is left to only one major city here. Just kidding, they're not going to be able to hold on to any of it. But we're going to see one final country get involved in this war. This country has sat on the sidelines for World War I and basically the entirety of this entire war. And if you couldn't guess already, the country joining is China. China is going to be the key for the lock of hope inside of the coalition of the New Order, allowing them to take down the red team. The coalition of the New Order has now reached its peak, and it is going to absolutely demolish the red team. Northern Bengal is going to make their comeback after reimbursing all of their territory. They are going to start to invade into the red team. And if you remember, the red team carried out a lot of expansionist stuff over here in their northeast, and that's going to lead to a little something. Oh yeah, baby, big ethnic group. This ethnic group was mainly prioritized on the anti-red team, because if you remember, the red team kind of made a lot of crusades up here. It was for religious, but more for political influence, and these people have just decided that, enough is enough. So the crusaders, or the crusades, are going to rebel away from the red team, and this is going to put a severe dent in the red team, as now they have been limited to basically only their core territory. This rebellion over here in Afghanistan is going to work together with Purple Persia to take down the red team in the west, where all of their genocide has been happening, and they're going to enforce a policy of letting the people, choose what religion they want to be a part of. So a lot of people are starting to readapt their religious beliefs. The red team front line down here is going to be completely eradicated, as it is replaced by blue team troops moving up north into the more economically important areas of the red team. And the yellow team is going to make their first moves as they move back into red team territory, which they once controlled world thousands of years ago. And the Bengal nationalists aren't going to be too violent, but they are going to move out so, they can get some more independence and sovereignty or autonomy in the peace treaty. Most likely sovereignty. But this rebellion up here isn't a rebellion, it is a revolution. This revolution is in support of making a brand new red team government, but not being down here in Kathawar, being up here in the northeast. These guys claim to be the original red team. Now it's like over here where these guys claim to be original Russians, but that wasn't true. These guys are the actual Russians, but these guys have a little bit more of a point. The red team has been taken over by radical ideology, and at this point, they haven't been their true selves for a very long time. And these guys are claiming that they're going to uphold the policies that the red team once did, claiming to be the old red team. They're going to move throughout a lot of these areas, being very, very, very liked by the people. And you might be wondering, how is the red team now in a catastrophe? They were the strongest country in the entire world. What happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. Putting people under a dictatorial oligarchy with only 3 oligarchs representing them and ethnically cleansing leads to the people not liking you. And if you know anything about geopolitics or government, you know that the entirety of the government's authority is built on a very, very thin pillar, and that pillar is made of people. Without people, government doesn't function. So with this idea in mind that has been presented by this sort of grayish brown country, they are going to have a big boost of morale, specifically over here in the west with Persia and the Cyan team. And the blue team is going to be able to march north, now getting to the actual Kathawarian areas. And Arjan Kathawar, finding his nation in a catastrophe, is going to do something. After these areas are taken by yellow team nationalists working together with the blue team, this area is just going to be completely ridded of military. And Arjan Kathawar is going to do something. He's going to make a speech to about maybe 1 million people being their only followers left. Arjan Kathawar has lost all of his influence other than these 1 million people who are listening to him make a speech. He is going to admit that his legitimacy was never really authoritated, and he never was able to conscript the Forgotten Codex. There is a gasp in the audience, and a silence is going to fall among them, and Arjan Kathawar is then going to pull out a gun. And with this gun, the crowd is going to go crazy. They don't know what Arjan is going to do with this, but Arjan is going to board a boat, and he's going to go here to the middle of the Indian Ocean, and he is going to intentionally sink his ship. He blames this on the Trapezoid Alliance. He's going to say that the Trapezoid Alliance, made his boat sink. But now Arjan is dead. His body is found in the shipwreckage. And the shipwreckage was over here by this island. And this is where Arjan is going to be hospitalized. He attempted to take his own life by, pinning it on the Trapezoid Alliance. But instead, the currents brought him over here to this island. But he is not able to be revived, and Arjan is now dead. And with that, the Indians are going to collapse. They're going to subside to this rebellion, and now the red team is not on the map for a very long time. But the blue team is going to invade Sri Lanka, and now all remnants of red are eradicated. Now, I know the Arjan stuff with the boat thing, that might have been a little bit of a sensitive topic, but all you need to know is that the coalition of the New Order has emerged victorious. And now we can take a look at a treaty that will basically be dividing up the red team's Napoleonic efforts. Alright, so this is what we see our map looking like before the coalition of the New Order, and it is going to change in 3, 2, 1. And this is what we see the red team division looking like. This peace treaty was nowhere near lenient to the red team, considering everything that they've done. But first, we're going to be starting over here in the west. We see Afghanistan retaking a lot of their territory over here, and this is followed by Purple Persia taking a lot of territory which has historically belonged to them. But now we see this new country appearing, which is sort of a dark cyan country, and this country is going to be a light red religion ethno kind of culmination. So it doesn't really make sense to give them over to Afghanistan or, giving them over to Persia. They are just going to be their own state, which has kind of ethnically, become its own thing. But now we're going to see the return of an old face, being the Indus country. This is nowhere near to what they actually looked like, but this is what they are going to be represented as here. If you look at the rivers, the Indus stuff is all inside their borders, so I'm going to count that as a dub. But now we're going to be seeing northern Bengal getting a lot of territory from the red team, and South Bengal is going to be reimbursed with a massive amount of territory. Like, they have just grown a lot. But next we see a very familiar face reappearing, and that is the yellow team. The yellow team has not been on this map for thousands of years, but they have just returned. Staying down here in the south, we see the blue team is going to reclaim their territory before the red team coalition. Also, Sri Lanka is going to be given back its independence, but the blue team has been recompensated with their land north of their border, and now the red team is going to be split into 3. Now, you might be a little bit confused because this is only one line, and yes, they are going to be giving this independence, but there is going to be another state which I have not yet discussed, and this state is going to be the official split of the red team. Now, it's not going to be actually like a claimed successor of the red team. This is just going to be a state that was made out of them. Because, like, haha, you lost the war. But the third state I was talking about is this pink one over here. But now it's time to give all of these guys their capital cities. Looking over here for this dark cyan country, their capital will be right over here. The Indus country right here, smack dab in the middle. This pink country will have theirs right here. The yellow team, I'm not quite sure. I remember where their capital is. Also, this was their color. But their capital is going to be here. So the yellow team's capital will be right there. And these guys, surprisingly enough, actually don't have any major cities. So we're just going to go ahead and give them some. It's not, you know, that complicated. Just give them a major city. But they're going to be having their capital right here. And that is everybody. All of these countries have now just achieved their independence away from the red team. And of course, you can see what the red team looked like before. They have, you know, severely shrunk. But now it's time to give all of these guys all, you know, ideologies. First of all, this big green circle is going to dissipate. Alright, and these are all of the circles that we are going to see. All of these countries have been released, and they are ready to choose their brand new ideologies. Now, of course, the dictatorial oligarchies are going to change. For example, North Bengal is going to swap over to a East Asianist country. But the green team, the red team, the yellow team, and all of these guys are going to have an interesting ideology, which I will bring up later. But these guys over here are going to be communist. By the way, these guys are communist. This is because they are allowing their people to do whatever they want. Well, not whatever they want. Of course, there are, you know, laws that are being imposed, but they have a lot more religious freedom. But down here, these are the old parts of the world, and it is going to be interesting because they are going to develop a brand new ideology. So we can just go ahead and add a brand new circle to our list here, and these guys are going to be civilistic. Now, you might be wondering, what is civilistic? What does that mean? Well, of course, it is correspondence with the civilism that, you know, the red team was trying to spread. Like I said, it does stem off from that civilism that the red team was trying to embrace, and they are going to be represented by, let's see, a yellow circle. No, we already have yellow. We already have gold. How about orange? Yeah, orange works. Now, civilistic is going to be very interesting as it is going to be shared among these countries over here in the, like, OG areas of the world. So, of course, it's going to be adopted by the yellow team, the green team, this new country, the Indus country, the pink team, and of course, the red team. Now, the red team would definitely be an interesting scenario, but we're also going to see Sri Lanka getting a brand new ideology as well. Let's make them an oligarchy. Also, sorry, Sri Lanka, I forgot to give you guys a capital, which I should probably do. So we're just going to put it right back here in the north, like, you know, where it was before the red team invaded. But yeah, now we have to go to the alliance layer, because that is going to be something that is definitely not going to need updating. First of all, the Trapezoid Alliance did expand into areas like Persia, and like Afghanistan and Turkmenistan. These guys are going to stay inside of the Trapezoid Alliance, except the Southern Arabian one, which joined just for the war effort. But Purple Persia is going to leave so they can build their own sort of sphere of influence, and that is respectable. But yeah, red team, they're minute. They're very small now. Once again, I keep referring to this, but the stability map, you can just see like how much has changed just in this episode.
Settle down, Carter. There's an explanation. I was once neglected by my bloodline, deemed unfit for a place in the house of Mersaland. I rose up the ranks by lying. All politicians do it. I know my nation is on the collapse, but what is done is done. The people have changed, Carter. I am making my speech later, and I know it will be my last. I will leave you with one thing, Carter. Being a politician means going to unprecedented levels, whether it be bending the truth or manipulating. Oh, and one more thing. We all need a grand exit. It's just, who is willing to follow through?
Now, of course, with the collapse of the red team, one thing that is going to change is the list of the top 10 strongest countries. And there are countries that are definitely going to change places. So actually, I am just going to reassign the list because this is very outdated, so goodbye. So yeah, let's just have that be our first event. Now, of course, the big question is who is number 1? The previous number 2 country was China, and after, the red team fell and China was involved, they most likely reaped a whole bunch of benefits. And that's going to be evident as they are now the strongest country in the entire world. China has definitely come a long way. They started down over here and they slowly made their way up here to what is now mainland China, and they are now the strongest country in the entire world. But now, if we're talking about second strongest, it is definitely going to surprise you, and that is going to be that it is Western Arabia. Western Arabia was previously number 6, and, they have just gone up a lot. That is mostly because they took a lot of reparations from the red team. If you didn't know, the red team was the strongest economical power, and they were able to reap a whole bunch of benefits from that. So, Saudi Arabia is now number 2. Number 3 is Russia. Pretty understandable. They are massive and also very militarily capable. But now number 4 is going to be over here in the French country with all of their colonial assets. They have definitely taken in a whole bunch of money. Number 5 is going to be Iberia. I am not quite certain on what their place was earlier, but they are number 5. Number 6 is the Benelux country. They have come a very long way. They used to be a very poor state over here, but they've evolved into a very strong, formidable European power. Number 7 previously was Burma, but it is actually now going to go to the state of Norway. As I've, accentuated a lot of times in the past couple of episodes, Norway is a rising power, taking a role as the North Sea Empire. But now, if we're trying to assign the number 8 power, it is not too obvious. But in this case, I'm just going to tell you, it is the blue team. The blue team has recently been exerting a lot of interesting policies over here in Indonesia, of course with these guys breaking away, but they are still able to reap a whole lot of economic benefits. And with their newly acquired territory here, which is, just not to... it's very populated. So yeah, it's understandable that the blue team is now number 8. But if we were talking about number 9, that is going to go over to the greater state of Romania. Strong European power, go figure. And number 10 is going to be England. England has not been on the top 10 list, and they have just suddenly made their way here, and that is pretty cool for them. But yeah, that is the top 10 strongest list made and done. We have China, then Western Arabia, then Russia, then France, then Iberia, then the Benelux, and then if I remember, Norway, then the blue team over here in South India, then Romania, then England. So that is our official top 10 strongest country, and, it's pretty good. But there is also another major thing that we are going to need to discuss, happening after the red team fell. The economic disparity that the world is going to fall to is going to be the official Great Depression. There was sort of a mini Great Depression after World War I. A lot of these smaller states, which were heavily contributing to the economy of the world, just kind of, vanished. But the reason why it wasn't really classified as a, economic crisis is because, economic powers such as the red team, the brown team, they still existed, so that's why it wasn't really a Great Depression. But now with the red team falling, it is a official Great Depression. The world is struggling a lot, and we can see that is going to heavily affect some countries inside of this episode. But yeah, just immediately talking about that, we are going to see a country collapse over here in the Balkans, and it is going to be the Cyan Macedonian state. If you remember in the last episode, I think it was, no, not the last episode, a couple episodes ago, we saw these guys fall into a rebellion with their lineage that they united with in the Macedonian Civil War. They just tried to break away, and these guys used some very interesting things to, have that not happen. And yeah, they're gonna collapse. Basically, their government just stops working, and it is a big mess. And that rebellion that I was talking about, they're going to reappear, and they are going to siege the southern areas of the country. But Romania, being the strongest country in the area, is just going to come in, and they're going to occupy it, so no other rebellions can be staged thus far. And yeah, this Cyan team is now just going to be divided among, the outside powers. Sorry, I haven't made a video in a very long time. I think I've said this before, but I have just come back from Israel. This is the first time I've recorded a video in the past couple of weeks. So I'm definitely going to be a little bit rusty, but I will try to bring up the pace. And yeah, just going back to the main thing, we are going to see the division of Macedonia. Alright, and in this treaty, we see that Macedonia is now no more. They have been replaced by a successor state, being this yellowish lime team. But we also see this cream yellow country taking a lot of their northern territory. This was bestowed upon them by the Romanians. And yeah, these guys are actually going to have very good relations. But now we have seen the first country being affected by the Great Depression, and that is Cyan Macedonia. And it is not going to get much better. But something I do want to note is that I updated the alliance layer thing. It looked pretty weird to just have blurry shapes. So now I have the yellow with the black border. and it's also the same with the economic alliances. If I can pull out the right layer. Yep, you could see the Western European Accord. It has the border thing. And yeah, that's just going to be, more visually appearing. But I did not come to this layer for nothing because the Circle Alliance is going to be expanding. And that, of course, is going to be the recently expanded country of Western Macedonia. They just took in a whole bunch of territory, and now the entirety of the Northern Mediterranean has been encompassed by Circle Alliance members, which is a pretty cool feat. But not straying too far away, we're going to see the unification of two countries, and that's going to be over here in Italy. Now, these countries used to have very strained relations. These guys were a rebellion away from the Romans, and they have actually gotten a lot better with relations over the past couple of years, or should I say decades. It's been definitely more than years. But they are going to be sealing the deal with an official unification under the government of Rome, and that is going to be a very symbolic event, as now Rome controls the Italian peninsula once more. Now, it's definitely interesting to see what would happen with their colonial assets, so yeah, we're just going to see Rome do some stuff with that. They are going to be giving a good chunk of these eastern areas to their Carthaginian puppet state, who, they kind of deserve it. They have been very sad over the past couple of episodes, and they're getting a good amount of land, but then Rome is just going to go ahead and take the rest, which is a, pretty bad, I don't want to say a bad word, actually. But yeah, the unification is definitely having the world look a lot different, actually. Northern Italy, the colony kind of gave a little bit of color relief, but, it's what would realistically happen with the Great Depression. The unification of countries, specifically with a stronger country being Rome taking in a weaker country, is just what would happen. But yeah, a lot of events occurring over here in Europe, and actually we're going to have to do a little bit of an ideological thing. These guys are still a full monarchy because there are just two full monarchies combining, so they're just going to stay as a full monarchy. These guys are going to stay as a democracy, but I just need to move their circle, so it's just going to look like that. But yeah, now we have a good old Southern Europe update. But now I'm going to be going over here to the Indian Peninsula, and oh boy, where do I start? The red team, they have fallen very far from their perch, and yeah, their old leader, Arjun Kathwar, he has died. But why I came here, that is because of the ideology. You can see that the ideology here is very interesting. It is something called civilism, which is the kind of religionary thing that Arjun Kathwar was trying to impose. But if you're referring to a country that is of civilism in their government, they are civilistic and they're represented by an orange circle. And, it's just pretty random. Okay, what does this mean? The only thing that it means is that you are incorporating civilism into your government, and that is going to be apparent because we are going to see these guys taking on a new religionary aspect. If I go ahead and turn on the religion layer, this is going to look very cursed, but these guys are all going to adopt the dark red thing, so there we go. Alright, and with civilism being imposed over here in the Indian Peninsula, it is definitely giving the world map, in the religionary sense, a different look. But yeah, this is definitely looking interesting. The red team religion is still here, it's over here in the western areas, but these guys, if you remember, they had a little bit of a genocide committed against them. And a lot of these areas are going to now bring back their religion, specifically the outline, if you remember this Cyan country, which was a multi-ethno state. I kind of failed to elaborate on what that really meant, but what it, really meant is that they are going to allow pockets inside of their country to, go back to the light red religion. And now these official pockets are going to be readapting the light red religion. Also this area of the Indus country, which is going to be very, good. But yeah, the red team religion has overall shrunk. But now if we are looking at the blue religion, that is overled by the Bengal country. So I'm just going to take their outline. I've been doing that a lot. But now, of course, the Bengal country is going to allow for religious freedom. And the first thing that these guys are going to do is that there is going to be a mass adoption of civilism, which is, pretty natural. But the rest of it, yeah, it's just going to go over to the blue religion. And this is looking very interesting indeed. So the red team religion, I guess you can say it has kind of fizzled out. Now, fizzled out slash it's shrinking, which is a normal thing. Both civilism now being incorporated into the actual country and becoming the official ideology of them, we are actually going to need to discuss the, government structure of these countries. Now, if you remember, the government of the red team before the, coalition against them, it was a dictatorial oligarchy, but that is not happening anymore. Now it is just going to be sort of the setup of a normal oligarchy, but it is, of course, going to have that civilistic aspect to it, and that's what differentiates it from, a normal oligarchy. The only difference between civilism and an oligarchy is that civilism incorporates the actual religionary aspect, so that is definitely something to keep in mind as a differing aspect. But these guys down here are actually going to do pretty good. If we're looking at the stability map, some of them are actually not doing very good, but some of them are actually I've said actually a lot in the last couple of seconds, but they are going to update into a better stability. These pink guys were pretty bad off just being released from the red team, but they are now actually going to update themselves into a yellow country. And, not going too far, ironically enough, the yellow team, which is a yellow stability, is going to turn into a lime stability. And overall prosperity has been reached in the Indian Peninsula with the absence of the red team. That is definitely interesting to think about, but now we are going to be going over here to the Middle East. And that is because a couple of countries are going to be joining the Trapezoid Alliance. Now, I know I said a couple, but it's only going to be one. That is going to be the Southern Anatolian state. But there is another alliance that I do want to speak of, and that is the Square Alliance, which has definitely been, very dormant over the past couple of episodes. But they're actually going to be expanding for the first time since World War I, and that's going to be over here in the Finnish country. This Finnish country has been on the rise, and their idealistics do match up with the Russian country's idealistics, so they are going to go ahead and join this alliance. And this is great for Russia, as now it expands upon their influence, which is very good for them. But yeah, the only thing that's really changed in this episode is, not actual borders. So let's go ahead and change that. The Lime team down here is going to be unificating with this Vietnamese country. Not really sure what to call them. Doesn't really matter though, because they're going to be They're going to be unifying. This is because if you look at the religion, there is basically no difference. They are both of blue religious ethnicity, but their economies have also become very intertwined. But something interesting to note after this unification is the questioning of the Triangle Alliance. And that is for good reason, because it is actually going to be changing right now. Now, no, I'm not deleting it. Well, oh god, that was tragic. I am deleting it in a sense, but they are now going to be in a new form. You can see the previous members were the Northern Bengal, and the Southern Indian Blue Team, and there is already an overlying economic alliance here, so these countries are just going to go ahead and incorporate themselves without military binding, but with an economic an economic bind. So of course, North Bengal and Bengal are going to join. Would the blue team join? I'm not sure. The blue team is going to abstain from now as being, free, under their own accord. That is definitely something that they have wanted for a very long time, and they have just gone ahead and achieved it with the collapse of the red team and the moving away from other military and economic binding pacts. But yeah, a lot of prosperity has been reached with the collapse of the red team, and I know I've said that a lot of times, but it is just generally something that would happen. But something else to note is the Great Depression. So we're going to see the Great Depression affecting another country, but not in a negative way. It is going to be affecting Hokkaido. Hokkaido was not really, affected by the Great Depression, but these guys down here were heavily affected, and that is just going to allow Hokkaido to do this, and that is just going to end up like this. So Hokkaido has just annexed the Honshu country, which is pretty not sure how people would think about it. Hokkaido expanding is definitely an interesting prospect to think about, but with them being stronger, it is just natural for them to take in another country. Sorry, my lungs hurt. I'm not sure why. But now we're going to be going back over here to the Middle East after the joining of this Southern Beige team. We're going to see the Saudi Arabians do something a little interesting. They are going to be establishing a world order. Now, this is definitely interesting to think about because the Saudi Arabians have been very dormant in their history up until recently after they've been opened up by the Trapezoid Alliance. But, this is a step in a generally interesting direction for them. But if you are wondering what this globalist organization is going to be called, it's going to be called the Federation of Nations. Like I said earlier, it was established by the Saudi Arabians, so definitely an interesting aspect could be brought upon them overlooking this. And the Federation of States is going to be represented by a 3-point star, so of course Saudi Arabia is going to be in it. And a lot of the trapezoid members are going to join it as well. Of course, being Mesopotamia, it's kind of like the Saudi Arabian lapdog, but I don't really want to refer to it as that actually. So actually, let me just color in all the countries that are going to be joining this new federation. Alright, and these are the immediate members of the Federation of Nations. Actually, that name is a little bit strange. So actually, I'm just going to do the Federation of States. It kind of has a better ring to it, in my opinion. So the immediate members of the Federation of States are going to be these countries represented by the 3-point stars And right now, these countries didn't join for a communal boundary, but it is actually going to be for the purpose of economic struggle. Of course, the purple and gold Kazakhstan countries are not doing so well in the economic department, and that is definitely represented by these guys having a very bad stability. But some of these countries just joined for the purpose of, social security. Such countries being the Lime team, North Bengal, the Blue team, all of those, just countries that aren't economically suffering, they are joining because they want to be a part of a globalist organization. And they want to be a part of this globalist organization because the Saudi Arabians look pretty promising. Of course, we figured out in the last episode that Arjun Kathawar was never able to conscript the Forgotten Codex. And the Saudi Arabians never knew that. They just wanted to acquire it to figure out how to stop war. And they have acquired it. A recon mission has been staged in the Red Team during the peace treaty. When these guys were occupying the capital, the Saudi Arabians just sent in an operative and they stole the Forgotten Codex. Of course, they are not able to conscript it yet, and it is just going to be a little bit interesting how that folds out over the next couple of episodes because they are going to need a long time to conscript it. That is because it is in an ancient Kathawarian language. If you don't know what Kathawar is, it's this peninsula right here. It's where civilization started, by the way. But yep, Federation of States, pretty cool, globalist organization. Pretty suspicious, but some countries like it. But now we're going to be going to a final event inside of our video. That is going to be over here again on the military alliance layer, and things are going to heat up a lot. And they're going to be heating up over here in Western Anatolia. The Western Anatolians are going to mark their leaving of the Square Alliance, and that's definitely interesting because they, just joined it. They're a brand new country, but they decided that they want to join either the Mediterranean Pact or the Middle Eastern Order. And there is going to be an election inside of this country, which, if you know, that is never very good if they're in a time of uncertainty. And the uncertainty is, which alliance are you going to be joining? The Circle or the Trapezoids? One electee is going to decide that they want to join the Trapezoid Alliance, but the other person on the ballot is going to want to join the Circle Alliance. And these guys, they're going to figure it out old-fashioned style. And what do I mean by old-fashioned style? Well, of course, they're going to duel. Also, the ideologies of these guys are not very important. They are both Democrats, but the one that wants to join the Trapezoid Alliance is going to challenge the other competitor to the one that wanted to join the Circle Alliance. He's going to challenge him to a duel, and they both fire their guns at the same time, and they're both going to die. I'm not going to say where they're shot because that's a little bit too gory, but they are both dead, and there is now a state of anarchy inside of this country. And with the two electees of the opposing alliances are going to be, anarchy is going to start to spread inside of the Western Anatolian country, and it's just going to be over here in the south. If you're wondering what white is, basically it's just where the government has no authority, and just slowly and slowly these guys are going to lose their grip. Eventually, the beige team is going to send in peacekeeping forces, and of course, they were idealized to do this by the Saudi Arabians. So they're going to move in, and the Saudi Arabian peacekeeping forces, they're going to reach across, and they're going to try and contain the state of anarchy. But something very bad is that the Greeks, they are going to send in their peacekeeping forces, and they're going to be right over here in the west of Anatolia, which is pretty problematic. That is, of course, because they are right on the border of a separate area of peacekeeping forces, and the tensions between the Circle Alliance and the Trapezoid Alliance are at an all-time high. Eventually, these guys, their government is just going to fully subside. Cyprus is going to be taken in by the Southern Anatolians, and the rest of them is just going to fall into anarchy. But now it is a little bit interesting. It's going to turn into something a little bit sinister. But the peacekeeping forces are going to move into the areas of which are in the state of anarchy. Originally, they were just meant to sort of contain it, but now they're actually killing civilians that are in this anarchist state. And eventually, the entirety of Turkey, or, at least the Thracian claims, are going to be under control of peacekeeping forces, once again, quote, quote. And these peacekeeping forces are going to get into a little bit of a skirmish. Right over here is going to be the area where Greek troops are just going to go ahead and infringe on the peacekeeping forces of the Trapezoid Alliance. And that, of course, is an act of war. And if you know anything about acts of war, is that they are generally, frowned upon. If you look over here in the Federation of States, of course, both of these countries are in the Federation of States, being the beige team and the Greeks. But of course, their overlying powers are the Iberians and the Saudi Arabians. So the southern beige team, the Greeks, the Iberians, and the Saudi Arabians, they're all going to meet over here in Rome. And they're going to discuss what to do next, because this is a little bit of a standstill and nobody really wants to plunge into another world war. Of course, there was World War I, and something that I think wasn't too apparent is that the coalition of the Red Team, that was not a world war, that was just a coalition. But something is going to happen over here in the Roman capital that is not too favorable towards the economic state of the world, and that is that they're going to both leave very angry. They're not really able to decide who is in the right and who is in the wrong. Eventually, these two countries are, they're not going to agree. And the Southern Anatolian country's representative, they're going to leave in a little bit of a huff. They're going to return down the Saudi Arabian capital, and the representative is going to be like, okay, these guys, they're nuts, they're whack, we should take them down. And that's what's going to happen. The Trapezoid Alliance is going to send an impossible list of demands over to the steps of the Roman capital. Their demands is that you are going to dissolve the Circle Alliance and subside a lot of territory and allow us to take the entirety of the Thracian claims in Anatolia. And of course, when they reject this, they are going to be declared war upon. The Trapezoid Alliance unanimously agreed to declare war on the Circle Alliance, henceforth why they are colored in as red, and the Mediterranean Pact is colored in as blue. And with the declaration of war being traded off, I would like to welcome you all to World War II, the War of the New Order. Now first, I am definitely going to start over here in the Mediterranean Middle Eastern areas, and that is because we saw the beginnings of a big conflict. Now you might be noticing that I used the word big conflict, not world war, and you're correct, this is not a world war. Currently, at the moment, this is a regional Mediterranean Middle Eastern conflict, but it is going to evolve into a lot of a much bigger conflict. So it will be known as World War II in the future, but as of now, these countries mostly know this as the Mediterranean Middle Eastern War. So yeah, let's just get started on the immediate fighting, because this is the beginning of a 3-part segment in WICSO, where it's just going to be World War II. 37, which is this episode, 38, and 39 are all going to be dedicated to like front lines and battles and a whole bunch of lore, so I would recommend watching all of the next 2 episodes. But the first of our fighting is going to be seen over here, of course, with the peacekeeping forces. If you don't know the story, then I'll just give like a brief overview. Basically, what happened is that this Thracian country, they were heavily affected by the Great Depression, which, like I said, was caused by the collapse of the Red Team, and they fell into a little bit of a political spiral. They had an election, both of them were Democrats, but one of them was keen on joining the Circle, and the other was keen on joining the Trapezoid. Now, instead of going for a democratic election, which is pretty strange, why wouldn't you go for a democratic election if you are democratic? These guys dueled. Yeah, they went gun to gun in a field, and both of them ended up dying. And after this, the Thracian state went into a state of anarchy, and eventually peacekeeping forces were deployed by Greece and South Anatolia. And eventually the peacekeeping forces met up and they got into a conflict, and now we are in World War II. That was just sort of a brief overview of the beginning of the conflict, so you can better understand where this is coming from. And yeah, the Trapezoid Alliance was the declarer of war. But of course, the immediate fighting is going to be demonstrated by the Trapezoid Alliance. Like I said, they are the aggressor in this war, technically. And the peacekeeping forces were armed with guns, which probably signifies that these guys were intending this to happen. But they are going to be moving up the Anatolian coast, somewhere where, war hasn't been seen for a very long time. But something interesting we see happen is that the Romanians are going to get involved. They're not going to get involved on the war, which means, no, the Square Alliance is not getting in on this. The Romanians are just going to go ahead and occupy the remaining areas of Thrace. We saw they did something similar to this with the Teal Macedonian state as they fell into a similar political state, but this is just going to be under the occupation of Romania. For now, it is going to become a protectorate state. The policies are being protected until a government, most likely a Square Team allied government, can be put into place. But for now, the peacekeeping forces are going to start to duke it out with each other. The Greek peacekeeping forces are mainly prioritizing themselves in the east, which was really dumb, because now they're disconnected from the actual Greek supply lines. And yeah, eventually all of these peacekeeping forces are either going to be taken as prisoners of war, or they're going to be allocated into a grave. Now this is a major development in the war, because this is, logically where it should stop. This is where they should come and meet for peace talks, and they try that. They're going to meet over here in the capital of this Thessaloniki country, and they're going to attempt to, try and work this out. They're not going to try and mediate it, but they are going to try and understand it. And this conference, which is, I guess, the Thessaloniki conference, it is going to be overlooked by none other than the Romanians. The Romanians have really established themselves as a sort of peacekeeper in this area, trying to, bring it upon but also with their demonstrations here in Thrice. But this conference, yeah, it doesn't really achieve anything. These guys are just gonna fight for like 2 hours, and they just leave angrier than they did enter. So the war is gonna continue, but we actually see somebody is gonna get involved in the war. And the country that's gonna get involved on the war is going to be, if I can select the circle, it is going to be Germany. Now, of course, Germany is not gonna see any direct fighting. They are mostly just a contributor trying to aid the the Mediterranean order. I don't know why I said Mesopotamian, but that is just a country that is joining, and it kind of sets off a little bit of a domino chain, because a lot of these Western European countries aren't really liking the idea of a new world order in the Middle East. Of course, we saw the Federation of States, and that was established in the last episode, but it is, kind of interesting with this conflict arising, because this was established by the Trapezoid Alliance, and there are members in the Circle Alliance of which are involved in the Federation of States. Now, in a realistic timeline, these countries will probably leave, and that is what's going to happen. We are going to see that the Greeks are going to go ahead and make their exit from the Federation of States. And yeah, that is just kind of something interesting to look out for. The Federation of States, they were just made, but now they're already starting to see a lot of failure. The reason we saw this failure is because, of course, the Greeks left, but this is because they saw the world order didn't really allocate much from its previous overtaking. Of course, the previous world order was being dictated by the red team with their little, old world order, but now it's only shifted 1,000 miles west, and it's with a power that shares very similar idealistics to the red team. Now, of course, not the modern red team, the dictatorial oligarchy red team. That is the country that they are sort of modeling this after, and the Circle Alliance, right now, their main goal isn't fighting off the Trapezoid Alliance, it is to prove to the world that this is a bad thing. But nonetheless, the fighting is going to continue in the form of a, Aegean Sea, kind of naval warfare style. Some islands are going to be captured, of which only being this one, but it's kind of similar to what the Americans had over here during World War II. Not this World War II, real life World War II. The island hopping campaign is very, very dangerous and very, very life effective. But they are going to be able to capture these sets of islands and even make a very small landing over here in Crete. But now, interestingly enough, we are going to be going over here to Eastern Asia. Another country is going to be making their entrance into the war. This country is going to be joining the Trapezoid Alliance. Sorry for you Circle Alliance supporters. But they are going to be joining the Trapezoid Alliance, and that is going to be none other than the fascist Dark Cyan team. Now, there's not really any, particular reason that they're joining, but they are joining to kind of give a scapegoat for their policies, and it's working very well. Eventually, some people in different countries, being high elites, are starting to recognize what these guys are doing is a little bit more justified. Now, the sort of balance that joining an alliance has gives a little bit of influence off, but of course the elites were inside of this country and Korea, because of course China, #1 strongest country, they don't really have to be influenced by any of this stuff, they can just say no. But this is going to be followed by another country joining the war. And we are starting to get to the stage where this war is going international. That country joining the war is going to be, of course, Korea. Korea as a country has been through a very long and extensive history, one not really full of many flowers, but more of force. Korea has always been sort of a struggling nation, of course, with a whole bunch of rebellions here in the middle of their country and the struggles in Japan. Korea is trying to redeem themselves as these areas were part of their civil war, and their troops are going to start to march out and liberate some areas inside of this country, because a lot of bad things are happening here. If we look at the religion layer, these guys are Orange Team nationalists. And if you see the outline of their country, yeah, they're going to be doing the G word. They're going to be imposing the orange religion through their policies, and of course their policies are very forceful. That means that certain camps, yeah, that's right, there are camps, they are going to be adopting this localized religion, which is going to start to not become very localized because it is spreading all across the entire country. It appears over here in the West because, of course, their policies are imposed inside of their borders, and that's the entire reason this line is here. But eventually, these segments of the country are going to be, joining this religion. They don't really have a choice. But these segments that are joining the religion, these guys are mostly in the non-populated areas. You can see that the major cities lie outside of it. And this is because, the Dark Cyan country, of course, I did say that they had power localized within their borders, but that doesn't mean that it can be more concentrated in other areas than not. Because these guys, they are urbanists, of course, any power that's trying to win over the people. To try and justify their actions, they are urbanists, which means the rural population is going to be easier affected, and that is going to be very bad. That is seen as a war crime. Of course, there hasn't been any convention to, establish what is and isn't a war crime, but these guys are kind of establishing it themselves. On the other side, we are going to see that Korea is going to make major advancements in the front line. They have not captured any major cities. These guys, their only major city is up here, but a lot of their urban population is in this general area, and if you can just go ahead and capture this area, that would be very detrimental to this fascist power. So Korea is going to continue their endeavors. They have been in a state of isolationism for a very long time, of course, ever since their civil war happened. But another country is going to join on the side of the Circle Alliance, and that of course is going to be this blue communist country. Of course these guys, also broke away from Korea during their civil war, but they are willing to band together with their predecessor to take out a regional sort of foe. But yeah, the war has continued to spread not only within the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern areas, sorry the stutter, but it's also starting to spread over here into Eastern Asia, not really to see any direct fighting, but for a cause, of which being the taking down of dictator, authoritarian, bad country. Yeah. But staying over here in Eastern Asia, we are going to see a relatively anti-good thing happening. I don't know how to phrase that. We see a brand new alliance forming, of which being a military alliance, and that is going to be led by none other than China. China is a country that has remained relatively isolationist up until, the coalition that they were involved with, but they are going to be starting their own alliance. This is going to be known as the Triangle Alliance. Almost got confused there. But of course, the immediate members are going to be this southern pink Chinese country. It is pretty predictable. But we're also going to see the Sakhalin country joining, more like the Siberia country. Don't know why I called them Sakhalin. But another country which you may not have guessed would join is going to be the Central Mongolian state. Now, what have these guys done throughout their history? A whole lot of nothing. These guys have basically just sat around and done nothing. They took a little bit of territory in the red team invasion that happened here, but they also took a little bit of territory, just kind of like the divvying up of smaller states, but that's really the only thing that these guys have done. Sort of like China, these guys are... Oh my god. Sort of like China, these guys are starting to break their isolationist state, like many other countries. So with the proliferation that these guys are starting to see with military imposement, the Eastern Asian theater is going to get a lot more heated. Not of course with guns, but with sort of a forceful aspect on the head. These guys are really scared because one of your main enemies has just joined an alliance with the strongest country in the entire world, and they could definitely rough you up. So it's a little bit of imposement, I guess you could say, but now we're going to be hopping across the water, We're going to be hopping across the water because people in the Iberian colonies, they've had enough. We saw this tried to be done democratically, of course, with the releasing of the Ecuadorian state, but people, they're just done. They're up to the limit, and they can't really handle the Iberian country anymore. The economic strain is just a little too much. So we're going to see, regions of the country start to break away, and this has been a long time coming. We are going to see a load of national rebellions start to break out over here in South America, one being a pink one over here by the border of Ecuador. These guys are in support of joining the autonomous state of Ecuador, but one of their other policies is actually making Ecuador a sovereign country. Another group, it's pretty simple, they just want to join the Brazilian state, they just want the map to look like this, which... that's very plausible. But we see another rebellion occurring, and that is going to be an orange one over here, which is more of the urbanized local population that was more established by the Iberian country, and now the Iberian country is only left to these areas. And of course, these guys, they were given their government by the Trapezoid Alliance, and that is something to definitely look out for because espionage is starting to become a major aspect inside of this war. But there is something on this map that you are starting to see, and that is that the North American and South American continents have looked the exact same for a very long time. And that's natural, of course. Colonial countries, they're a lot less easier swayed than normal countries, because they're colonial assets, they're assets, you don't want to lose them. And that leads to a little bit of stationary, which is definitely being seen over here in the Americas, and people are sick of it because the stationary is imposing a lot of bad policies. But now going over here to the Indian Peninsula, this is where a couple of files are going to be released, none other by an espionage act led by the blue team and the yellow team. These two countries infiltrated the red team capital and basically pulled out all of their information dictating on civilism and Arjan Kathwar. they figured out that Arjan Cathawar wasn't even derivative from the House of Mercialand. Arjan Cathawar was Burmese. Now, what does this have to do with India? Well, Arjan Cathawar, one of his main propositions to the people was that he could conscript the Forgotten Codex because he was from the House of Mercialand, the house that made the Forgotten Codex. So this is released and the red team is going to get a lot of hate, understandably, and they are being very frowned upon by their neighbors. But of course, they have a new government. This is not the same red team as the red team that was doing the dictatorial oligarchy stuff, but they're still getting a lot of the hate. So that is just something to look out for, some more, heightening of tensions over here in the Indian Peninsula, and this is going to lead to a couple of countries doing something. Now, most of the countries are doing this out of petty. Of course, the blue team and the yellow team are, but there is one country that is going to be joining the Triangle Alliance who is joining because they're actually worried of what the red team could do, and that is, of course, going to be the country of Bengal. Now, this Triangle Alliance, it isn't really meant to be anything permanent. It is more as to serve the purpose of a defensive pact, which is, of course, what all of these pacts are, but they're defensive in the sort of way of, we won't have any outside proliferation outside of our borders, of course, but we will protect within. But that also comes with the thing that these guys have a lot more economic assets to them, and of course that is already held with the Square Economic Alliance. But yeah, a lot of heightening of tensions instead of actual frontline activity, but we're going to be seeing a major development happen over here between the trapezoids and the circles. The entirety of Crete is going to be captured, and you might notice that all of the Greek islands have been captured by these forces, some of them mere miles away from the Greek coast. And the official landing is going to be made into Greece, and eventually Saudi Arabian reserves are going to arrive. But not only Saudi Arabian reserves, we see reserves from the UAE, Mesopotamia, South Caspia, the Afghan country, Canaan. All of these are strong countries, and they have just arrived with their militaries, which do outclass the Circle Alliance. This landing, of course, I did say that outmatched them, but that does not mean that there are going to be some individual sufferings, being experienced by the beige team. But Greece, their northern half, is going to be captured by the peacekeeping forces, which at this point, they're not even deserving of that name. But eventually, Greece is not going to be on the map for a first time in a very long time, as Greece has officially fallen. But Romania has just made a statement to the entire world. The Square team will not go with a fist down. They want to stop all of these alliances from doing their thing, and they are just done. They're flat out done. Before we see them do anything, we're going to see two countries joining the Square Alliance, of which being the Baltic country. Might be a little bit confusing because the Russians and the Prussians just invaded the Baltic country, but, the Baltics, they had a new president, I guess. But another country joining is going to be Finland. Now, not this Finland, other Finland, these guys are going to be joining, and that is for the purpose not really for anything secretive, but it is just because they have close relations with this Eastern Finnish country. Oh, and I think I forgot to update to technology map. I did. I'll do that by next episode. But right after this declaration of trying to stop the alliances is made, the Square Alliance is going to choose a side. The Square Alliance is going to go in front of a crowd over here in Prussia, and they are going to declare an act. This act is going to change their alliance from one of stationary to one of aggression, as now they are going to join on the side of the Trapezoid Alliance against the Mediterranean Order. This is going to be very important for the next episodes coming, as the front lines are now going to reach actual Circle territory. But something, relatively small happening. We just see another country joining the Square Alliance, and that's England. Anyways, that will do it for today's scenario. I hope you guys did enjoy. This episode might have been going a little bit slower because it was just mainly allocated to dealing with the lore and me explaining a lot of things, so that is just mainly the purpose of this episode. But there were, of course, some major developments, such as the Eastern Asian Theater and this. Now, going over here to Europe, we saw that, of course, the Russians, or the Russian alliance, they joined in on the side of the Trapezoid Alliance. They did this because they want to have better relations with the Trapezoid Alliance, of course, that's why they joined the war, but it's also for dominance over Europe. Europe has remained stationary for a very long time. France and the Benelux have been the main colonial powers, of course, not including any countries that are in the war already. And the Russians and their alliance are hoping they can exert their influence further beyond their current boundaries. So they're going to do that. For the second time in history, we are going to see Prussian troops move out into Germany, and they're going to be moving into the northern areas, some areas which are still previously a little bit rebellious from the actual World War I. And in this process, they were able to capture a major city, and they spear out, attempting to capture another one. Romania is also going to start to mobilize their troops, making a very small incursion here in the eastern areas of Germany, and this German state has been very traumatized over the past couple of episodes because they got cooked in World War I and they never really got to be a strong European power, and now they're just being invaded again. So yeah. So while the invasion of Germany commences, Romania will begin to arm up and take in some Russian reserves to try and fend off against the Balkan powers. Of course, Greece has already been overtaken by the beige team, and, you know, that's not really a thing to have to worry about. Of course, the beige team is now starting to move their troops up into this Albanian country. But Romania, for the first time in a very long time, they're going to be expanding west, and they're going to be invading into Albania. Now, I know I said that this Albanian nation and Romania had pretty good relations, but that's just been flipped upside down. These guys, they're not going to know what hit them. And if you weren't already aware of what's going to hit them, it is going to be a wall of Romanian troops. Now, Romanian troops were already stationed here with the collapse of the Teal team, just in case anybody inside of the Albanian country got some interesting ideas. But now they're just being used for this, which is interesting. With the entry of the square lines into the war, Albania is pretty much cooked immediately. They are going to be divvied up in half between the beige team and Romanian forces. And the beige team forces are not going to continue up north. They are going to provide for the Romanian team. And this is going to prove very useful, as these guys are just going to kind of lead the front line here in Albania, / like Montenegro. I don't know why I called this Albania. But Romania is going to continue to move their troops out and about here in the Balkans. And it looks like that the red team is going to be very successful inside of this war. I mean, look at them. They are a very formidable force encompassing the entirety of the Middle East and Eastern Europe. And this is a very scary group of countries to be going after. But these countries have something up their sleeve. I'm not gonna, reveal it right now. But these guys, don't worry. They have some stuff behind their ear, I guess. But now we're going to be going down here to the Iberian colony, and everybody is kind of in a standstill. Of course, all of these areas have broken away, and of course, Brazil is in support of these guys. So Brazil is actually going to be officially joining in on the war, supporting the colonial rebellion, and they're going to be joining on the Trapezoid Alliance, not planning to stay in it, but they are just going to be like a member of it, at least for now. So this brown rebellion, they're going to be getting a lot of steam. A lot of these areas wanted to break away. It's just the Iberian control was a lot more evident here, so they're just going to be using it with force. The Brown Rebellion is going to basically take all of the important Iberian port colonies here in Brazil, and this is a very detrimental blow to Iberia because this is where a lot of their colonial assets were coming from. Of course, they have their colony over here in Australia, and that's, negligible. Nothing really happens here. But it's a very different story over here in South America, where the Iberians, they need this. It is to the point where Iberia is starting to see detrimental losses to a country that broke away from them, or two countries that broke away from them, so that's pretty embarrassing. But what is the pink Ecuadorian thing doing? What are they doing? Of course, they are inspired to break away by the Ecuadorian state, and these guys, of course, are going to pledge their allegiance to this rebellion, but they are going to fund it, but they're not going to be officially in the war. There's definitely going to be a lot of espionage over here in South America with all of the officials and plans, but Ecuador, if just clearing it up, Ecuador is on the side of the Pink Rebellion. And these orange guys are actively receiving aid from the Brazilian states, so they're going to be able to move out and assist them. I know this area is very marshy, but we're also going to see that the orange country is going to move their forces up north, capturing a major city and a lot of important economic assets that were withheld by the Iberians. And this is going to bring sort of an interesting war aspect to the Americas that we haven't seen. Of course, like I stated in the last episode, North America has remained relatively dormant, with these 4 countries being on it. Hokkaido, France, China, and Portugal. They have just been here, and they have been, settling it, all of that stuff. But nothing has really changed, and people, they want some change. So with the idea of a sort of rambunctious America, I don't know really why I said that word, but they are going to be thinking about the I word, independence. And suddenly, a whole bunch of articles are going to come out inside of America, and there is going to be a little bit of an incident. This incident occurs down here in Florida, and it's kind of comparable to the Boston Massacre, in the case that Portugal is going to be firing on a group of protesters. This is seen throughout the entire world as a very, very, frowned upon act. And Portugal knows this. They are very sad that they had to do this. At least they say that. But what is done is done. The people here, they're pissed off. They're angry. They're livid. And with this is going to come with the people actually taking a stand and they are going to be breaking away. A rebellion is going to occur in the Portuguese colony of Florida, and this colony has been under the Portuguese for a very long time, but that doesn't really mean much in this sort of case. And right off the bat, this rebellion is going to be gaining a lot of steam. By outside powers, yes. There are going to be remnants of it over here in Cuba, and some over here in the far stretches of the Bahamas, of which it encases very quickly. But this rebellion is going to be a very formidable force, being backed up by people and people alone. Another rebellion is going to break out inside of the Portuguese colony, and that is going to be a blue Mexican rebellion. So that is just going to look like this, and these guys are going to be breaking away because they want their own state. They want to be independent from their colonial chains. But now going over here to Eastern Asia, Korea is going to be continuing their endeavors over here in the fascist country. They're going to continue to liberate people from their rule, but these guys are going to actually have a pretty impressive counteroffensive over here in the west of their country. This is very vital for them, as these are the urban areas of their country, and if they lose that, then they lose all of the support for, doing what they're doing over here with the Orange religion. So it's a very back and forth front line over here, but of course they are getting the support of this communist country, but another country has just joined on the side of the Circle Alliance. That is going to be Hokkaido. Hokkaido joining is a very, very terrifying prospect to this fascist Cyan country, and that is for the reason that Hokkaido is very strong, but it's also for the reason that basically the entirety of Eastern Asia is against them. Like with what the, oh god. The entirety of Eastern Asia is basically duking up on them. And for good reason. I mean, look at what they're doing on the religion layer. If I can click it, there we go. But these guys, they're going to be pushing their luck. A militia from the Cyan country is going to be seen on the outskirt border of the Sakhalin country, and they are going to be staging a little bit of an accident. And in said accident, they are going to be crossing over the border and breaching some international stuff that the Sakhalis country had, come up with. And that is a little bit of a, war crime. They are going to take this up with China. Of course, China doing something would be very interesting, as they are the strongest country in the entire world. But China is done. They don't want to be affiliated with anything over here in Eastern Asia in regards of these guys. If you look at their ideology, they are fascist. So China is going to be enacting a status quo that they upheld with their members, now joining on the side of, I guess, the blue team over here. But it's sort of an entirely different theater, but it is blue because they are fighting along Korea. And yeah, these fascists are about to die. Sakhalin is going to immediately move in from the north. They had their troops stationed here ever since the Korean Civil War happened and the terrorist rebellion happened inside of these guys. But of course, the regular Cyan country, I don't know what they are. The Cyan country, they are going to be moving more forces throughout here. Of course, this was staged, so they knew that the Sakhalin country, and in which case China would be joining the war, which is pretty stupid when you think about it, because these guys are relatively weak when you think of the long game, and China is just going to go ahead and, yeah. That was pretty anticlimactic, but these guys have just lost their capital, and there are going to be loads of rebellions over here. These rebellions are from the urban areas. They were over here in the west, the north, and the east, and these are the areas where the genocide was being imposed. So this is very natural for this to happen. And all of these forces, they didn't really want to fight for the Cyan country. Yeah, these guys are going to get nerfed. The Chinese are going to enact a special force quo, and they're going to be sending their operatives up here into the Cyan country, liberating a lot of people. Korea is going to follow in soon after, and these rebellions are going to encompass the entire country, and in which case they're going to work to rebuild the Cyan country. So the Cyan country has been officially taken out of the war. They have been divvied up into occupation zones, with the Sakhalin, Korean, and Chinese are now all in accordance with each other, dividing this area up. Now the Trapezoid Alliance and the Square Alliance are surprisingly not that scared about this, because of course it's all the way over here in Eastern Asia, but there are some countries that could just, go ahead and join this. But speaking of join, we are going to see an event happen that is going to be very important for the rest of the war. Countries are going to be joining the Circle Alliance. You guys may have seen this coming, but France is going to be joining on the Circle Alliance, and so is the Benelux country. These two have remained relatively quiet for the past millennia, and they are now finally freeing themselves. Of course, the Benelux country kind of opened themselves up in World War I, but they are finally enacting, and they are putting their foot down against imperialism and the shadiness of Western Arabia over here in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. Western Europe is now in accordance with each other to take down the red squares and the red trapezoids. But along with this, another country is going to be joining the Square Alliance, and that is going to be Norway. Now basically the entirety of Europe has been involved in this war, and it is very interesting because this could bring upon a very, very large effect. Kind of like in real life where there was an Iron Curtain over Eastern Europe, It's the same here, except it's just a massive front line full of blood and gore. It's like all of this area. But this also means that colonial fighting is going to be happening. Of course, the English colony is controlled by England, but there are going to be Roman incursions into their colony, and this is something that I should have brought up in the last episode, but for some reason did not. But if we look at the rivers map, we are going to see that their main goal is to be capturing all of the major cities along the Egyptian coast, and another special division is going to be moving out here, as if they can cross the Nile River, that will split the colony into two pieces and bring upon the end of apartheid over here in Egypt. I don't know if you guys remember like what happened over here, but the Romans are going to be enacting an expansionist policy, not in a sort of negative way, but in a freeing way, because a lot of these areas are actually in support of reuniting with Egypt. And they're going to prove that. Multiple rebellions are going to be staged over here in the Nile River, calling for the Egyptian rule. They're going to be donning the flag of the old Egyptian entity, and they are going to be pledging their allegiance to the old Jedis state. All of these rebellions are going to be linking up in a massive rebellion, and of course now these guys are going to be invaded by the Canaanites, which are going to do a good job invading the entire Sinai. But they're not really able to get past that, and eventually the Egyptians are going to join upon the war. Of course, in this case, joining the Circle Alliance. Now, in general, this wasn't that hard to predict. Egypt hated their neighbors, but something is going to come upon this. Saudi Arabia is just really strong, and a country on their border has just joined an opposing alliance, so they're going to go ahead and do yep. But Egypt is going to do something very risky. They're going to move their jurisdictional capital over here to the old capital of their nation, which was their capital many, many years ago. But with their mainland being occupied over here in Arabia, they're able to reinstate themselves over here in their homelands. The delta over here is going to be captured by their forces, but they're going to remain wary of the Saudi Arabian colony over here in, Sudan? Eventually, Rome is going to meet up with them, and a major military operation is going to happen, but one major city is going to be holding out in garrison. And of course, this is being supplied and maintained by the Mesopotamians, but the Romans are able to move further south and east, connecting up with the Egyptian rebellion, which is now just sort of transformed into Egypt. So, yes, all of this is very interesting. You can see that the map is starting to change in a very interesting way. But of course now, more immediate fighting over here with the English Channel and in Western Central Europe. Romania is going to continue to march through the German countryside, but now the Germans are going to be able to establish a formidable front line with the brand new Benelux and French reserves. And these reserves are actually going to be able to kick out the southern incursion of Prussia, and they're going to be able to deter Romanian forces from their capital region, making a major statement that they are nobody to mess around with, when, of course, they have foreign aid. But Germany, for the very first time in a very long time, is going to be having their boots march into a foreign nation. This is going to be accompanied by another success, which is in the form of Prussian reallocation. They're going to be able to push Prussia back very, very far, reaching over to the Baltic Sea. But now Romania is going to be continuing their campaign, which is not so honorable, but they are going to be moving into this Croat country. Also, Albania is going to officially capitulate, and Croatia is going to continue to fall over to the Romanian forces. But now Roman reserves and the entirety of Western Europe is now duking up with these alliances, and now the war is basically at its climax. Or is it? The red team has just made a declaration to a good portion of its citizens over here in Cathawar. They're going to be declaring the return of a gunshot is heard in Purple Persia. This occurred because Purple Persia is done. They have recognized a form of imperialism. Of course, they know imperialism from a certain past, so the purple team is going to be joining unbeknownst on the Circle Alliance. But who else is going to be joining this war? None other than the red team. The red team finds itself in this war working in accordance with countries that they don't really like, including the Bengal country and Persia. These are historical enemies that they are now partnering up with to deter imperialism, ironically enough. But Purple Persia is going to be expanding upon that gunshot, and they're going to be marching their troops into the seafoam green Persian countryside. Eventually, more states are going to be joining in the face of freedom, including the Cyan country and the official Indus country. But more countries are going to be joining on the Trapezoid Alliance, fighting for a different kind of freedom. Freedom of colonies, freedom of people. These guys are fighting against imperialism, but in some form of way, these guys are imperialists themselves, but they are in reality colonizers, which sort of subsides into a imperialist route. But like I said, more countries are going to be joining on this trapezoid alliance, of which being this blue Southern Arabian country. This country up here, they are really not liking what the red team is doing. But most surprisingly, we see the blue team breaking out into a state of panic and paranoia, and they are now going to be fighting up again with the red team. Their troops, who were immediately ready for this, are going to start to move into the red team. And with this, we have reached the climax of World War II, and these countries are going to, they're going to fight it out in the next episode. The next episode is episode 39, and that is accompanied by episode 40. But just to sort of give you a little bit of an idea, the entire territories in Afro-Eurasia that are involved with this conflict are the ones that I'm outlining right now, which is a lot at the moment. Basically, this entire area is involved in World War II, and that's not even including the colonial assets in the Americas. I know I just said we've reached the climax of World War II, but of course the immediate fighting is going to be evident. The Afghan country is going to be moving into this Dark Cyan country, with them being their main predecessor, and them encompassing a lot of territory that they would like to withhold themselves. They're going to be fighting with their once enemy in the Persian country, and they're going to be marching their boots into their country. Of course, all of this is accompanied by a severe sense of nationalism shared among all of the red nations. And the UAE is going to be landing a naval invasion into the Persian country. But Persia is not going to be deterred, as they are going to continue to move up the coastline of the Seafoam Green country, capturing a lot of major settlements. But the UAE is achieving similar victories instead over here in the Persian Gulf, capturing 2 major cities and cutting off major supply lines for the Persian country. But now the red team is going to also have to face off against the blue team and this ethnic rebellion. And these guys are very angry at the red team. They've always been angry at the red team, but now they have their own state, and they are going to be exerting that with their own military force. These guys at this point have become an established nation, and they're ready to fight with the red team. On the brighter side of things for the red team, we are going to see that the Croatian country is going to basically be immediately wiped out by the Romanians. Not immediately, but immediate in the sense of the time frame from the Persian, Middle Eastern, I said Persian already. The whole thing that happened here, it happened immediately after that happened. And Romania is cooking. They are absolutely demolishing these circle members, but they are quickly halted in their tracks as a massive wave of troops is going to arrive on the front line. But with this, subsequently, the Prussians are going to be able to move out freely. And yeah, this war is absolutely massive. Eventually, this city that was garrisoned over here is going to fall. But as the final event in our video is going to occur over here in the Americas. Another massacre has occurred over here in the sense of similarities from the Boston Massacre. The French, they put down a rebellion over here a very long time ago, and they're going to be breaking out. These are the territories that the rebellion is going to be encompassing. You can see that is the entirety of the eastern coast of America, including this exclave. But this rebellion isn't only going to be felt inside of the American areas, but it's also going to be felt inside of the Canadian and Quebec areas. These territories over here belong to the Benelux. They're going to be joining on this rebellion, and this is also going to include the Labrador Island. But yeah, the final nail in the coffin has been achieved by the colonial rebels, and this is the climax of our war. Now, a major plot point in the last episode was that China joined the war along with its allies, and the Europeans, specifically the French and the Benelux, also got involved on the side of the Circle Alliance and created a very formidable front for the Middle Easterners and the Russians to deal with. But the Russians and the Middle Easterners also got some pretty powerful allies such as England, Norway, and surprisingly enough, the Blue Team. So yeah, let's just jump straight into this. Now first, we are going to be starting over here in Europe. This is because this is where a majority of all fighting was taking place between the square and the circles. And the front lines are going to continue to shift as the war progresses. We see the Prussians with Russian envoys are going to be able to push back all of the German incursions into their country, and they're also going to be able to create a front line into Germany, capturing this major city for the second time. We also see that Romania is able to breach the front lines, like I said, with said Russian mercenaries. And the Romanians with these Russian army groups are going to be able to capture the capital of Germany. Prussia is going to use this to enact a sweeping campaign inside of the north, now reaching the border of the Benelux country. And Germany has now been divided into 2 pieces, with Romania and Prussia both occupying them, and this gives Romania better leverage to invade the rest of Croatia. And overall, the European front has been won over by the square team, at least Central Europe. But now we're going to be heading down here to Egypt, and this is where we saw the colonial rebellion inside of England's colony start to occur. And it's going to continue as we see Romans are going to move down the Nile River basin, and it's also going to capture a lot of territory. And the Egyptian rebellion is just really starting to handle it to the English colony, taking another major city and basically the rest of the population. And it gets so bad to the point where they're actually able to invade and conquer the entirety of the Saudi Arabian thing, whatever this is. With this, the rest of the colony is going to be divided up among Roman and Egyptian forces, looking a little something like this, and this is a major victory won over in Africa. But speaking of Africa, there are a lot of things that I want to address here. First of all, with the collapse of the English colony over to Egyptian forces, Egypt was a rebellion, and maybe that gives some Africans the idea to rebel. So they're going to do that. And it's first going to appear over here in the Benelux country, and this is where we see the Mozambique country rebelling away from Benelux. There are going to be a whole lot of pockets inside of the Benelux country that are going to subside their relations with the Benelux and join in with this new Mozambique rebellion. If you do remember, a long time ago, the Mozambique country used to rule all the way down here, and they're just, they're coming back. But not only that, we also see South Africa making their return, with these being their claimed rebel territory. Now with these colonial rebellions is going to bring on a very interesting war aspect to Southern Africa, one that has not been seen for a very long time. The South African group is going to work on immediately taking on these Southern Benelux forces, and they're going to do very well connecting up all of their pockets. But on the other side, we also see Mozambique is able to move in to these areas, and they're also going to try and connect up their pockets. And it's going to go equally as well for them, as they're now going to move in to take a lot of the inland in the Benelux colony over here by Mozambique. And this is just more fuel in the fire for a major rebellion that is going to break out over here in the Iberian colony. Over here in the Iberian colony, we see two areas breaking away, being this teal rebellion over here in the west of the colony, and the dark blue rebellion over here in the east. And it has been a very long time since we've seen actual color inside of Africa, which is a very good sign to note that imperialism might be collapsing. But now moving up here to France, a massive rebellion is going to be occurring. These are the areas we see breaking away from the French colony. Of course, this is a whole colonial-wide rebellion, so it's not only, being restricted to one area, it is just a saying to all of the peoples inside of Africa that, hey, this rebellion is inside of your colony, how about we rebel? Now you might be wondering, why is the Roman colony not feeling any of this? And that is because Rome is just very close, so they can keep their grip over here in Libya. But over here in Somalia, it is not the same story, as an old country is going to make their return. We see Ethiopia returning under their own accord, breaking away from the Portuguese colony, and of course the colony is still here, but it is just severely weakened. So with these colonial rebellions inside of Africa, it is going to bring a very interesting aspect to the continent for the war. But now we're going to be going over here to the red team, where they're going to be making a little bit of a comeback. The red team is now receiving foreign aid, of course, from these three countries up here, but now also directly from the Bengal country and China. So the red team is going to be able to push up and take on this ethnic group, and they're going to be able to actually do a very good job at defending the area. And they're also going to be able to push out the blue team forces, as the blue team underestimated the will of the red team, as the red team starts to invade into the blue team. But now, of course, we are going to see the Bengal invasion into this ethnic group, and these guys might cease to exist, not saying anything though, but just so you know, their capital is going to be captured. And the red team is not only able to kick out their forces, but they're also able to encourage into their territory, taking a major city and establishing a very large front line. And eventually, the country ceases to exist as all of their populated areas have been taken, and this is going to bring on a very wide sense of nationality for both Bengalese and Indians, and this allows for a focused front line over here in the blue team. The red team forces are going to continue to throw themselves at the front line, not able to take any major cities, but they are able to encircle one. But now we're going to be going over here to Purple Persia, and this is where we see a very good thing happening. They're going to be able to push out the orange team now with Chinese funding, and at this point the entirety of the Circle Alliance is receiving Chinese funding. With this, the purple team is able to reimburse themselves inside of their own territory, also assisting the Cyan country. And now the purple team is able to capture the capital of the Seafoam Green country, now just doing that. But the Afghans are going to make a counteroffensive against the teal team, now going into their territory and capturing their capital. And the country is going to fall to Afghan forces, now facing up against the purple team. There are going to be some purple team incursions, but at the moment, their focus is over here in the Middle Eastern theater. And this is where they're lacking, as South Caspia is going to be able to come in and take a whole bunch of territory away from them, now reaching down here to the Persian Gulf and recapturing the old capital of the seafoam green Persian country, allowing for its reimbursement. But now we're going to be going over here to the North American areas, and this is where we saw loads of colonial rebellions happen, including this blue Mexican one, the Floridian one, and the shared American culture over here. And these guys are going to be able to do their thing as they're going to invade down here into this pocket of Massachusetts, and they're going to link up with their area over here by the Portuguese colony. Speaking of the Portuguese colony, it is going to start to rise in some separate pockets over here by these areas, and I'm just going to spare you the details. They take all of this. And now the American Rebellion is able to take a lot of very major victories against the French. But the French are going to be able to land inside of New Jersey, sort of as a Cornwallis thing, if we're referring to the American Revolution. Not this American Revolution, the other American Revolution. But quickly, the entirety of the Quebec colony, led by the Benelux, they're just going to be like, yeah, we're out. They're going to join up with this rebellion. And this is going to allow for their integration with the other rebellion. And at this point, all of this territory by Massachusetts is going to be integrated into the rebellion. But we also see the French incursion in New Jersey is going to be kicked out. This sends a widespread message that Europeans are starting to fall and their grip is loosening in the Americas. Now, of course, the Chinese colonies in South America and North America are going to remain under their control. But over here in Brazil, it is a very different story. At this point, colonial troops and mercenaries, which aren't specifically led by the government, but they are encouraged by it, are going to start to move into this Brazilian territory. And this is where we see a very large rebellion occurring. This is just going to basically include all of the Amazonian areas. And the rest of the Iberian colony is going to be divvied up between the Ecuadorian rebellion and the northern Brazilian rebellion, that one. But now going down here to the French colony, we see that Brazil is actually going to enact a own sense of military incursion. And they're going to be able to take on the French colony, but that's not their main goal. Their main goal is to spark the people here. And boy, they're going to be able to spark them as a major rebellion is going to occur, and that's going to cut off all French access to the entire colony, leading it to come under Brazilian control. With the Americas slowly starting to move away from Europeans, this is a very bad sign as the Europeans are just starting to lose, their grip on everything. At this point, England is actually able to win over the English Channel, and they're, for the second time in history, are going to make a rebellion here by, east of Normandy. So it's like D-Day, but east, I guess. I don't really know. And at this point, the Benelux country has completely lost control of their colonial assets. Moving down here, their entire colony is going to be divvied up by colonial forces, and it is going to look a little something like this. At this point, the Iberian colonial revolution is going to be able to take hold, as it is going to invade a lot of these territories by the northwestern area of their colony, moving up to meet up with the Orange Rebellion in the French colony. And at this point, the Victorian country is completely supporting this rebellion, and it is going to be able to move out through these areas and take a lot of territory, meeting up with Mozambique. Speaking of Mozambique, they're going to be able to siege and take Madagascar. And at this point, the Iberian colony is faltering, as now these militias are starting to just step foot into the territory and win it. And at this point, the Western Rebellion is going to be able to take the north, and this Victorian Rebellion is going to be able to just absolutely demolish any remaining colonial forces. And that's just, going to be very bad for the Iberians. And at this point, the Iberian colony has been lost, and Iberia has officially lost its grip. No, they still have it over here in Australia. Speaking of Australia, though, they are going to be joining on an alliance, and that is going to be the Trapezoid Alliance. And their justification is to rid the Australian continent of any European influence, and that, they're going to be able to successfully do it. There's not really much opposition to any outside forces here because colonialism did not treat Australia well, which is something I probably should have highlighted a bit better. But at this point, Red Australia is going to be able to move down and touch the southern coast of Australia, and at this point, the rest is going to be inherited by China, and the Iberian colony is going to be taken in by the Red Aussies. And this war has now gotten very, very extreme, as fighting is occurring over here in the old world, but also in the new world with some unexpected values. At this point, this blue Mexican country is going to be able to move up their forces into the Portuguese claim in Mexico, and you might be wondering how these areas are able to so easily just lose their grip. And that is because basically all colonial forces that were manning these colonies have just moved back to Europe to defend their homelands. So for example, the Portuguese colony, it's not like it wasn't strong before the war. It's just that all of their colonial assets have been shipped back to their mainland, and this is going to lead to a major colonial victory as the Blue Mexicans and the Floridian Rebellion are able to inherit it. And speaking of the Floridian Rebellion, they're just going to be able to take the Caribbean islands. But you might be wondering, why aren't these colonial powers putting those colonial men over here to good use? And the answer is that they are, I just haven't highlighted it yet. A final ditch attempt by the Western Europeans is going to be made, and this is going to be pushing into the northern areas of Germany. And the Benelux is going to be able to stage a military operation into the Prussian country. And this is Iberian, Portuguese, and French forces all combined. They're just under the banner of the Benelux. And they're going to be able to move in very deep. They're going to be able to touch the Baltic Sea and capture 3 major cities. But at this point, Romania is done. Romania is just going to go ahead and fight these troops. And at this point, there is a very narrow corridor protecting them from utter defeat. But they don't care. They're trying to win this war, and they go on to capture another major city, and they're going to be able to take the entire western regions of Prussia. And with Prussia falling back this hard, there is going to be a major strain on Romania to try and take care of this. But with Norway in the war, they're going to start to make their own military operations, landing in the Netherlands. Capturing a major city and the North Sea coast, Norway is going to be able to threaten the supply lines that are carrying out this impressive push. The Benelux realize that they're being invaded in their west and their north, so they're going to be forced to retract some forces. And now Russia is putting in their entire military in Europe. And Prussia is going to be able to make a massive comeback, retaking 4 major cities. And Romania is actually going to move in to occupy the rest of Germany, now cutting off this militia group. And these guys have nowhere to go. There are some Danish people that are harboring them, but at this point Prussia has disconnected Danish connections with this militia group. Not militia, military, but doesn't matter what you call them, because now they are dead. And at this point Romania is making its entrance into the Benelux country. And at this point, Western Europe is starting to crumble oh so slowly. But not getting any better for them, another colonial rebellion is going to happen, this time in the Portuguese colony of Morocco. This is what we see the rebellion looking like, and this is going to inspire a certain country to do some things. And this is going to bring back the Moroccan state from a very long time ago. They're going to invade up here to the Iberian claims of their country and officially reintegrate it for once and for all. And they are of course funding this rebellion, which is going to completely encompass the Moroccan colony. And at this point, this rebellion is going to be able to take a lot of the western areas. And I know this may seem a little bit rushed, but remember, I did say all of the colonial Minutemen have just taken all of these territories without much resistance from the colonial powers. And that's because this is very bad. You have millions of troops in your west, north, and east, and you're being backed by some very falling off countries. At this point, Numidia is going to make their exit of the war, and Numidia, backed by colonial forces over here in Morocco, is going to be able to invade into Roman colony territory. And this colony is going to face something a lot worse than colonial rebellion, and that's just straight up outside rebellion, or I guess outside whatever. The Numidians, backed by colonial forces, and of course, China. Don't ask how the Chinese forces got here, they just went here and around Africa. This is a very major campaign because Rome is basically the leader of this war, behind Iberia of course. But Numidia is going to be able to make very impressive incursions into the Roman colony, now taking a lot of their key military bases and another major city. Moving over here to Carthage. Now Carthage is a very interesting country. They have been here for a very long time, yet under colonial shackles, and they too are going to return. At this point, with Carthage returning, a lot of countries are making the assumption that this war is done and won, and the Carthaginians are going to be able to invade into the Roman territory, capturing 2 major cities. And at this point, Rome is just going to handle all of these incursions by giving this territory over to Egypt. But by the time they do that, Numidia and Carthage have taken an increasingly amount of territory over here on the northern coast of their colony. And the Roman colony is going to officially surrender, with that looking like this, and that is awful. I think I'm going to want to change that. There we go, that's better. The French colony is going to continue to see losses as the colonial powers are going to lose their grip, specifically the French colonial power, I guess you could call them. They're facing an all-out colonial rebellion with areas over here in Nigeria and Guinea and Senegal. They're going to be able to capture all of the French coast, and these areas are now of course being manned by Minutemen that just want to stay in these areas. But over here in Ethiopia, they're going to be able to invade into Portugal, and at this point just some areas are able to just break away in support of a military rule by Ethiopia. Don't take that out of context if you're watching 8 Pro's WICSO, but they are just going to be able to take all of these territories. with colonial people rising up and facing against their colonial powers. And of course, all of these developments are very good for the Trapezoid Alliance, and there's going to be another development that's very good. The Seafoam Green country is going to be able to make themselves known again, as Purple Persian forces have been reallocated to defend their homeland and this Teal country. But it's no use, as Afghanistan is going to be able to take all of this territory, but the Indus country is going to be able to invade a little bit. They're pretty neutral, even though they are on a side of the war, but yeah, it's just not going to go very good for them. Their incursions are just immediately kicked out, and eventually they're just going to, they're not really involved in the war, but they're just, doing their own thing. But at this point, the blue team is exhausted, and this major city that got encircled has fallen, and the red team is going to continue to move down the blue team coastline, now taking a lot of the inland. And now an individual victory is going to be acquired over here in India, as all 4 of these countries are going to leave the war. Of course, they are going to maintain their control over their occupied territories, but at this point, victory has been won by the red team, the purple team, I guess not the teal team, but they're occupied by Afghanistan. But yeah, the red team has achieved an all-out victory here in India, defeating the blue team basically, and the red team is just doing very good things. But at this point, another country is going to join on the Circle Alliance, and that country is not going to be who you'd think. North Caspia is going to be joining on the side of the Circle Alliance. Yeah, that was expected. I don't really know why they joined the war, I just didn't like how they looked on the map, to be completely honest. But now going back here to Western Europe, the Benelux are now facing an all-out invasion, with Romania in the east, Norway in the north, and the English in the west. The Romanians don't dare to move into Italy because, well, that is some very not easily able to take territory. Oh, you know what? I lied. They're actually going to land in the boot. And at this point, Italy is starting to crumble with their colonial assets now being taken, and they're basically going to sue for peace. They signed some special things with the Russians, and eventually Italy is going to make their exit of the war. This is, of course, unbeknownst to the Western European powers. They still think Italy is on their side. But I guess history never changes, as Italy is going to switch sides in a weird sort of way. But this is going to allow Romania to better focus themselves over here in the Benelux country. But at this point, the Iberian country is going to fall into civil war. Not their colonial assets and not their outside territories, but their own actual country. We see Andalusia is going to break away from the Iberians, but we also see a Grey Rebellion occurring over here in the southern French territory. And at this point, Iberia is completely and utterly cooked. But just focusing over here in the Benelux, the north of their country is going to continue to falter, as Norway is really just demonstrating how strong they really are. And even the English are able to invade into your territory. They're the 10th strongest country in the entire world with minimal support from Norway, and they're able to just whoop you. At this point, France is just going to die. A rebellion over here in the east of their country is going to be calling for the end of the war, and that is just going to take a lot of their country. And this rebellion is going to encompass the rest of France, officially eliminating them from the map. And it looks like the Circle Alliance has finally started to come down, and it looks like the trapezoids and the squares have officially won their war, I guess you could say. And this is going to be demonstrated further as the Benelux capital is going to be captured by English forces, and their country is going to fall into occupation zones with the English, Norwegians, and the Romanians. And the frontier over here by the Iberians is going to occur, as this French rebellion is going to continue in their invasions, now invading into the Iberian territory. But of course, these rebellions have to do their own handling, and they're going to be able to capture the capital of Catalonia, and the country will now cease to exist, now under colonial forces. But Sardinia is still here. Never mind. But now, what hope is there for the Triangle or Circle Alliance? Now, all of the members have been wiped out except the Iberian country, or I guess the Portuguese country. Yeah, they're going to leave the war. That was a good decision. And with Portugal leaving the war, they're not going to have any of their mainland taken away from them in a possible peace treaty. But their, colonial assets are going to die. Speaking of colonial assets, this entire thing is going to be taken by the colonial forces as the state of France no longer exists. This is also inclusive with Western Africa. And at this point, Portugal has given up their colony over here to the colonial forces, officially ridding Africa of any colonial touch. So let's just give a brief synopsis on the war thus far. North America, all colonial forces have been taken out, except like the Danish and the Chinese and the Hokkaido. But these areas are like the big, important, populated areas. South America has been won over, once again, unless you count the Chinese country. But Africa has been completely won over, of course, disregarding the Danish colony. At this point, Egypt has reimbursed themselves, and they are just going to be able to reinstate themselves as an actual civilization, and that is respected by the Trapezoid Alliance, although the Saudi Arabians are not very happy with that. But at this point, if you remember, Djibouti was an occupied territory between the Danish and the Portuguese, but now it's just going to be a Danish puppet state, because, you know, Portugal no longer has a colonial thing here. Ethiopia, they did good things. And at this point, countries are going to make their exit from the war, and this is going to include the blue team, and that's it. Yeah, it wasn't that serious. And look at this map. It's so colorful. I mean, there's never been this much color in the Americas, never this much color in Africa, and, you know, Australia is still pretty dull, even though it's been rid of colonial forces. Once again, except China. You know, China's special. But of course, one country in the Circle Alliance still stands, and that is Rome. And Rome is going to see the very quick downfall of their empire, as Carthage is going to make a landing over here in Sicily, capturing a major city and eventually the entire island. Romanian forces are going to link up with Carthaginian forces. Of course, said Carthaginian forces are funded by China, like I said. And I know Rome technically had a ceasefire, but, you know, you still got to do what you got to do. And eventually, the Romanians are just going to continue to move into these territories. And Rome is going to have some of its final days, and that is going to be, well, limited to a couple seconds, as now Rome has been taken down, and that is going to mark the end of World War II. The fall of Italy has now concluded the War of the New Order. Said New Order has been won over by the Saudi Arabians and the Russians. Of course, there were individual successes inside of the Blue Alliance, including China's success eliminating this fascist country, and also the success of Bengal wiping out this red country. Or, you know, when I say red or blue country, that means like their side on the war. Of course, the, you know, blaring individual victory was that the red team was able to win over the blue team, and the purple team was able to hold their own. And the most blaring victory led by the New Order is going to be the colonial shackles diminishing by the colonial powers, with all of these areas now being integrated into a free democratic society. And now it is time for a peace treaty to be devised, and this peace treaty is going to be held in none other than Catalonia. Of course, at this moment, Iberia is not on this map, and France is not on this map, and Benelux country is not on this map, but they are all going to be convening over here in Catalonia, or I guess Barcelona if you want to make it comparative. And now I will show you the Treaty of Barcelona. Alright, this is the map that we saw before the war with the updated alliances. I did keep the Triangle Alliance because it will be existing after this war. The Trapezoid Alliance, the Square Alliance, they're all still here. The Circle Alliance, but all of the territories have just been traded off to what they were before the war. And this peace treaty is now going to be happening in 3, 2, 1. Alright, I think this is everything. You can see the world map looks drastically different. Of course, one of the blaring differences being that all of the colonial powers have released their colonies, but not as the way you might think. I'm kind of just like ripping a page out of Adis Pro's book, but these colonies were released as their own countries, and they will be divided up in the next episode. Episode 40 will be specifically for, you know, dividing up colonies, but now we can start to get into the nitty-gritty of this peace treaty, of course after just stating that all of the colonies will be divided up in the next episode. I'm going to save Europe for last because that is the most interesting part. But over here in Eastern Asia, of course, the Triangle Alliance was able to achieve victory, dividing up this Dark Cyan country. We also saw the red team gaining a lot of land away from the blue team and this country up here, which has been severely crippled. Another country that has been severely crippled is this teal country, but they are just going to have to resolve that in the next episode. Over here in the Middle East, we see that Saudi Arabia is able to take Egypt's land over here and a little bit on the outskirts of their colony. But Egypt is now, they're back. Egypt has been reimbursed with the entirety of the English colonial territory, and that's pretty good for them. But now we're going to be going over here to Europe, and everything is radically different. Starting over here in Iberia, we see that Portugal, I know I said that they weren't going to lose any land, but they did lose a little bit of land to some newer countries. Said newer countries, this one is going to be Andalusia. This is going to be the Basque country. Iberia, or I guess Catalonia now, is severely crippled. We see a southern gray French country, the return of northern Italy, who I forgot to give a capital to, so I guess I'll just put it in their old capital, so it will go right here. Speaking of northern Italy has been, they're brought back. and the Italian peninsula has been divvied up between a lot of powers. Of course, Rome took it upon themselves to take a lot of their territory back before World War I, but we see that countries like Carthage, Numidia, and Morocco have resurfaced, and some of them even taking territory from the colonial powers. Sicily's been taken, Corsica has been taken, and northern Italy is back. We see this dark blue country being made out of remnants of the Benelux country, this dark green country as well, and this orange country, who I also forgot to give a capital to. I am kind of lacking. But if you just wanted to know, it is going to be right there. The English didn't get any territorial land, but they are going to get a whole lot of port access on the Benelux coast. Speaking of port access, we see Norway is going to be able to get a little bit of territory here. Germany has now ceased to exist. They are a puppet state of Romania, who is now massive. Prussia is now even longer. Russia annexed North Caspia. The Thracian country is now reduced down to Thrice, and their Anatolian claims have been taken by South Anatolia. Canaan expanded a little bit by the Suez Canal. But yeah, just take it all in. I mean, this is what the map looked like with the occupational areas, but now just look at it. It's just so much different. Oh my god. But that will do it for today's scenario. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did enjoy, then please consider liking and subscribing. It helps out the channel a ton. You can also join the Discord server, channel memberships, and you can go down and ring that notification bell, all of which have implied perks. And yeah, this is just about how I wanted World War II to go. I had an old WICSO on my old channel, which don't watch it, please. But it only got to 29 episodes, and this is, we're going to episode 40. And that's pretty cool in my opinion. But yeah, once again, if you did enjoy, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will catch you all in the next episode of What If Civilization Started Over.
The war is won, the European powers have fallen, and the colonies are now free. The colonies dividing themselves up have no forefather to keep them in check. Eventually, they'll pour and they'll rot. Powers will rise and powers will fall. This will bring economic devastation, and with that we can gain it and reap it for ourselves. With this, Project Reset can be put into motion.
And of course, thank you to our channel members. This includes Noah N21, Andrew2YT, Red Team WICSO, The Official Geomapper, Maxtermine21, TerraSerican6997, Rome WICSO, Swifty Mapping, BFDIA Channel Y, and Upgraded Bro. Once again, thank you guys.